Trade concerns need to be put in perspective. Put them in perspective for us, Michael.
What I've been saying to clients over the last couple of weeks is you need to remember the size of the numbers. When we're talking about global economics, we need to think in trillions rather than billions. Right? So the global economy is an $80 trillion economy. The US economy is approaching a $20 trillion economy. The Chinese economy is coming up to $13 trillion. So when we talk about trade tariffs, we need to bear in mind that in the worst case scenario at the moment, we're talking about $150 billion and tariffs of 25% on that. So it's somewhere around 0.2% of Chinese GDP and about 0.1% of US GDP.
That doesn't take into consideration that other countries could be sucked in.
Sure, but when you talk about the overall magnitude, bear in mind again that we're talking nominal numbers here, including inflation. So the US economy in nominal terms grew by 4.5% last year. China grew by 9.7% last year. So even if you double, treble it, we're talking about really quite small numbers in the grand scheme of the global economy and relative to the growth rates that these economies are producing. So I think it's not that it's not important, it's just that it's very important to put it in perspective, exactly the size of the measures we're talking about, because we hear billions, we think, wow, that's a big number, but really when you put it in perspective, it's a much less big number than you would originally think.
Well, and there are potentially substitute countries to get imports from for both the US and China, but at the same time, I mean, do you really think it's going to be that little of an impact? The IMF has come out and said if there were to be a 10% tariff on every export and every partner's export as well, that would actually lop off 2.3% or so from US GDP growth in the short term, the first year at least.
I think what we've got to remember here is that, it is lose-lose for the global economy if you have an escalation of this where you start putting tariffs across the board on all exports. And because of that, we've seen the market voting on this over the last couple of weeks. When you get news of tariffs, the market sells off. When it looks like actually maybe that's not going to be quite as bad as people thought, the market rallies again. And I think as we head into the midterms, it's going to be clear for politicians around the world, in China and in the US, that it's not in the best interest for their voters and therefore for the politics to put through measures which the stock market's not going to like.